All right, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have retired Chief Colina. He retired from the city of Miami PD. He has over 30 years experience in law enforcement, and wellness and leadership are priorities to him. And so I'm really looking forward to having him on today's episode to share his insights and experience with you. So welcome to the show, Chief Colina. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously you came from a large major metro police department, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who know who you are, but for those who don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of background?
Sure. So I was originally from New Jersey, but we moved down to South Florida when I was little. I did my entire career at the city of Miami, and I was fortunate enough to be able to rise through the ranks. I was a police officer, a detective, then a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander, a major, an assistant chief. I got to serve as assistant chief over every division before becoming the chief of police. And I mention that because it was really helpful to work in all these different elements because I'll admit this that there's a lot of jobs in the policing world where I always thought, what do these people do? Right? I mean, until you go there, then you realize, wow, this is a lot of work. And so I feel fortunate that I was able to kind of work across the agency and have a real appreciation for the work that everybody does, right? Because it's all important.
I appreciate you saying that because I do think that we are all guilty of doing that at some point in our lives, whether that's personally or professionally, of kind of looking outward and being like, what are they doing?
Right.
I'm so busy, or I got all this stuff to do. What are they doing with their time? And to have the ability to, walk a little bit in their shoes, to be able to have a sense of um, empathy and understanding for what they do. And what you said about how everyone plays an integral role, I think is so important to understand that, especially in your line of work, it's a team. And the more you can have that understanding and appreciation for the hard work that everybody does, the more the team is going to benefit over time.
Without a doubt. And it really is. I mean, there's jobs in a major police department where on the surface it may not seem like it's a stressful job or it may not seem like it's a busy job, but every one of those jobs, they have their own hierarchy, they have their own bureaucracy. They rely on other people to be able to do their job effectively. It's never just a one-man show. And sometimes that complicates it. The more people you have involved in what you do, a lot of times it complicates the process, but there's no choice in the matter. So it really was very helpful to be able to see that at every different element of the agency.
Yeah, I kind of, this might sound weird, but I kind of like would take it as a compliment if someone looked at me and is like, it doesn't seem like you have a lot going on. It's almost like that.
Right.
You've heard of the duck analogy, right? Where like on the surface everything looks good and calm, but underneath you're like paddling like hell to stay
Right.
afloat. And I feel like we all kind of have that, right? Like, and and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I would say it's a compliment that if someone can look at me and be like, wow, like you seem like you got it together, like you seem like you're not that stressed, you're calm, and I'm like, that's great that I look that way because under the surface, there's a lot going
I
on.
got a lot
So,
going on. Oh yeah. No, 100%. I think it is a compliment when you see someone and you think I can approach them, I can ask for something, I can inquire about something because it looks like they got it together and I'm not going to disturb them. I think that is a compliment. And it's a gift too, right? It's something that if you don't practice, it's perishable.
mm,
I think it's important to be able to, manage your work area. And if you're able to manage your work area, you're going to come across to people that way.
yeah. Well, I also think that there's like a level of like, how can we train ourselves in different areas of our lives to stay level through all the ups and downs of life, and again, I'm not perfect at this. I've definitely had my moments, but we've all seen it, or we all have done it where You see like that person that is just always up when or always down, and it's just very chaotic. How can we train ourselves that even in the most stressful times, we're trying to keep that even keel. And then when things are really, really good, we try not to get too high because we know that neither of those things are going to last longer. As long as maybe we think or we hope, right? So they're fleeting. And so how can we stay level? And I think that that is how we're more effective and efficient with our time. I think that's how we create longevity, is really trying to keep that evenness.
Yeah, and for me, it was really important. I was mindful of it as the chief of the way that I came across,
Mm,
right? How am I being perceived? Not just my message, not just the mission, but me as an individual, whether it was through the tone of my voice, whether it was my facial expression, how I'm standing. That was important to me because I knew that people were paying attention.
right.
And by the way, they're paying attention even when you don't realize that they are. You're being watched even when you don't realize that you're being watched just because of your position of authority. And so I tried to be mindful of that all the time. I always wanted to come across like, it's going to be okay and everything is cool. And for me personally, I always embrace the fact of I'm just a person. That's it. Like anybody else, I'm in this position of authority and I'm going to absolutely do the best that I can, but I'm just a person. I'm flawed. I'm going to have a lot of smart people around me. And together, we're going to figure it out and it's going to be okay. And it was kind of like a mantra, right? Hey,
Yeah.
we're just people trying to do the best we can. That's it. Don't convince yourself that you're an expert in anything. There's always so many variables. And if you just kind of accept that, I think it really does temper the stress, right? Things are coming. Okay, well, then they are, right? And we'll figure them out one at a time.
Yeah. I like that statement of, don't convince yourself that you are the expert. I think that when we think that we've arrived, that's when we stop learning. And so, if you always have that growth mentality, no matter where you are in life or in your career, that there's always opportunities to grow, there's always opportunities to learn more, then we're never in that state of like, I know everything, and therefore I'm resistant to growth and learning. I wanted to ask you, because you had so many different roles, do you encourage that for younger officers? Do you think that having different assignments and kind of stepping out of your comfort zone and maybe doing things that you didn't necessarily think that you were going to do at some point in your career, that helps with not only creating more of a well-roundedness to yourself, but I also think maybe helping to reduce that risk of burnout?
I think so. Anytime that you move right from one place to the other, there's certain stressors that come with that, right? Because there's the uncertainty of what is this, who are the people there, am I going to get along with them, how are the supervisors, am I going to perform, right? Am I going to be able to do a good job? So those stressors exist, but if you go in with an open mind and if you go in understanding that you're new to that place, so there really shouldn't be any expectation of you coming in with any level of expertise. You're new. So it's completely acceptable to come in and say, "Hey, I'm only curious. Why do we always put things over there? And when it seems like if they were here, they'd be closer." And then sometimes, hey, that's a great idea. We never thought about it. Or it might be because if it's a hazard or we're not allowed, or we were sued in 1979,
Mhm.
so we can't stack shit over there anymore, right? That kind of thing happens, but you're learning, right? So and if you did get something right, well, now you're contributing, and that feels good when you're able to contribute. So I would encourage it because it's exciting to go to new places. It's exciting to learn new things. It's exciting to meet new people. And I don't want this part to sound transactional, but Paige, the more people that you meet, the more people that you have, in terms of your contacts, the better off you are as you grow in any organization, right? Because there's more people that can speak to what your commitment is, your work product, your professionalism, your leadership. There's more people that you've been exposed to and more people that have been exposed to you.
Yeah.
And that matters, it matters as part of your growth and it matters as part of your success.
Yeah. No, I love that. I don't think that that sounded transactional at all, and I agree. And I'm very introverted. It was really hard for me, coming up in my career to, have the ability to connect with a lot of people because I felt really shy and really like scared. But I think the more, and it also helps you, the more people, it's not just advancement, but I think the more perspectives you have, the more
Oh,
conversations you
100%.
have, like you get to grow as an individual because we kind of have our one track mind. But, for an example, through this podcast, I've like expanded my way of viewing wellness and the world in such a different way than I would have on my own. And so I think developmentally, the more people that you can learn from and talk to is really valuable. And I think that and I don't know if you noticed this, but the way that we see things and the way that we approach situations is a choice. And I think we forget that. We forget that it's, we have that ability to choose how we see things. And when you talked about, trying new things, you're like, it's fun, it's exciting, you get to learn something new. And you could just as easily have said, it's scary. It's a lot of work. I dread that. I don't really want to do it, And so I think that it's an important reminder to everyone that we have the choice on how we want to view a new situation, and we can choose to view it in a positive way or a negative way, and training our brain to look at these things in a positive way. Because I think that people are afraid of new things. They're afraid to be new. They're afraid to suck at something. They're afraid, to start over. But if you can position your mind of this is going to be fun, this is going to be exciting, this is going to help me to grow personally and professionally, then like now you can expand from there. But if you're always in a negative mindset, you're never ever going to be able to grow in the way that you want to.
Without a doubt, I think it's a great point, and I'll even take it a step further. Let's
Please.
suppose for a second that you did go to a new uh, job, a new unit, you have a new assignment, and you discover that you are not good there.
Mm.
That's not a fit for you. Man, that's really good that you found that out, right? It's still a good thing that you went there and thought, man, I thought I was going to like it, but I really didn't. I didn't feel challenged by it. Or I thought that I was going to excel at this, and I found that I was in a fog most of the time, and I just wasn't productive, and I didn't feel good about it. Well, that's good because now you've learned that. And now you can allow someone else to do that who is going to excel, and you can find something that you're good at. So even if you've experienced that, you don't have that feeling of, man, I wonder if I should have not gone there and tried that. What if I would have? That what if feeling is not good. That feeling of regret that you didn't try something is not a good one. If you tried something and it didn't work out, well, you gave it a shot, and that's all you could do is give it a shot.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what was popping in my head while you were talking is we want to get to the end of this thing with as few I wish statements as possible,
100%.
or as few question marks as possible, and I think that we want to in life experience as much as we possibly can because then you start to identify your likes, your dislikes, you tried, and so you're never going to wonder what if or I wish I would
That's
have
right.
tried that. So that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm glad you said that. I do want to talk a little bit. You said this earlier about the stresses being different. So as you enter into different roles, as you rise through the ranks, there's different levels of stress. And ultimately, you retired as the chief of police. And so what was that like? What was the stress as a chief of police, especially for a I keep like putting them together today. I can't speak. Major Metro Police Department. What was that like?
Um, well, so you certainly feel grateful that you have the opportunity to serve in that capacity, right? Because it doesn't matter how qualified you are or what your credentials are or how hard you work. There's a lot of people that fall into that. There's a lot of people that work hard. There's a lot of people that are qualified. There's a lot of people that have a lot of credentials, but only one person can hold a job, right? At the same time. And so there is a feeling of gratefulness. However, until you hold that position, you don't fully grasp the seriousness of it, right? So going in, you understand that you're responsible for all these people. But at least me personally, I felt the weight
Mm,
of the city's success is on my shoulders because if we don't do a good job with crime, people don't visit, right? That affects merchants, that affects, small business owners. That affects our residents because the taxes go down, right? Property values go down. Now there's less of a budget. I mean, it's really important that the police agencies do well because it affects so many. And you don't really grasp that until you have that job. The other thing that you realize kind of right away is there's a lot of different entities that are tugging at you.
mm,
So as the chief, you have the union, you have the rank and file, you have HOA presidents, you have activists, you have politicians, you have business improvement districts and that kind of stuff. Never ever will there be a scenario where all those people are aligned in what they want.
right,
Never. So when you're pleasing one entity, there's a good chance that you're displeasing another. Right? So it's that was a little difficult, right? To manage that because it's only natural to want to um, seem like you were the right pick. You want people to think, "Hey, I'm glad that they made this person the chief because look,
mm,
right?" You want people to feel that. But luckily for me, I kind of realized right away, man, if I want to sleep at night, I'm going to have to think what is best for the city first when I make a decision. How does this affect the city as a whole? Secondly, how does it affect the agency? And then lastly, how does it affect me? If I can follow that in my decision making, I'm going to be able to sleep at night. I'm not going to make, I'm not going to get them all right, but I would know in my heart that I always had the best interest of the macro first and not my best interest. And that helps significantly. Um, but but it's stressful, Paige, because you never quite know how things are going to work out. And if you're in a big agency, it affects so many people, your decisions. So many people are affected. And so that, you got to get comfortable with that and accept it to be able to function. Otherwise, it could really paralyze you and you don't make any decisions.
right. I've heard a lot, and when we have these conversations, we talk a lot about officer wellness and employee wellness, and a lot of times we forget about executive wellness, and leadership wellness. And you hear that it's lonely at the top, right? With everything that you had going on and the huge responsibility and the immense amount of stress on your shoulders, were there any resources or tactical things that you did to kind of keep you in that level state and to down regulate and counter some of that stress? You mentioned earlier like a mantra, and was there anything that you did that helped you out?
There was a few things I did uh, try to reflect as often as I could, right? So I would think daily about what's happening, how are we doing? What can I be doing better? How can I be helping someone else? The helping of someone, sometimes when you feel anxiety, if you occupy your mind, right, whether it's doing gardening or sanding a piece of wood or going to the beach or whatever, that it kind of de-stresses you. For me, I found that if I was getting caught up too much in what was happening, and I took the focus off what my job was specifically and concentrated a little bit on, well, let me see what Paige needs and let me work on helping her. Because a lot of times it's so much easier to say, hey, Paige, I can help you with this and let me take that off your shoulders. And I'm going to concentrate on this and you work on that and we'll finish quicker. Um, that's easier. than thinking about what you have to do. Sometimes when you have a lot, it becomes a little overwhelming and then you do nothing, right? The work is piling up on your desk, but you feel stagnated. So that would help me. I was fortunate because of the relationship that I have with my wife. So I would call, I'd come home. I know a lot of people have this thought of work is work and home is home. Don't mix the two.
Mm,
Honestly, I've never felt that way. And, we've been married 33 years. We've been together about 37 years. And no, I would come home and I'd say, hey, man, this happened. What kind of shit is this? And she would be able to tell me, well, honey, did you consider this? Or maybe that person felt this way, or maybe they had a bad day, or, what was the context? Um, and it was great that she wasn't a law enforcement person, right? And having the confidence that what she's telling me is for my benefit because she is my wife and has absolutely nothing to gain at work from it
mhm.
was also reassuring, right? She's telling me what she believes for real. If she thought, hey, honey, I don't think you handled that well, she would say that. If I ask people at work that, 99.9% of the time, everybody's saying, oh, wow, yeah, you're great. Well, yeah, I got 4 stars on my collar. And you start to believe that shit, by the way. So it was great to be able to come home and her tell me, you're just a person, man. You're
Mm,
you're just like anybody else, right? So for me, that really worked because I had someone that I can speak to and that can, bring things back to a level field,
yeah.
right? Not make too much of it and not make too little of it, right? Finding the balance. And she was really helpful in that respect.
I hear a lot of grounding in what you talk about. Is like, how can you come back to like feet on the ground, right? And
Yes.
one, the first thing that you said was kind of like a pattern disruptor. I don't know if you've heard of pattern disruptors, but it's like, okay, I'm in my head. I'm like ruminating on this, or I'm having anxiety about that. How can I get myself out of that headspace and into something else? So having like a different task or something that's like, gonna switch you out and disrupt that thought pattern, right? And so I think that there are a lot of different ways you can do this, but that's a really effective strategy. So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what a pattern disruptor is, we can take a look and, see different ways you can do that. But it's just exactly what it sounds. How can you disrupt that like pattern of thinking that is, having you in that kind of mental loop? And then the other thing is, and I talk about this all the time. I'm so glad that you brought this up and that you had this in your partner and in your wife. It is so important to have people in your circle who want you to win. It's also really important to have people who are going to give you their perspective, good or bad. But again, they
Good or
have
bad.
they have to the caveat to that is they have to want you to win. They have to be in your corner, right? And people who are going to maybe shake you a little bit and bring you back down to earth, right? Bring you back down to that grounded space. And I have also, been really lucky in friends and family and, people in my life who are willing to do that, that know me for me, that are going to have an outside perspective and be like, wow, like you are getting way too full of yourself right now. You need to come
Yeah.
back down to earth. Like what is
Right.
happening, and you have to, the flip side to that is because it's never good to hear someone say, I don't think you handled something well, or I think that you messed up. It's never good to hear those things, but you have to be able to receive those things, and you have,
Sure.
especially if it's a partner and you know that they genuinely care about you and your success. You have to be able to be receptive to that feedback and then have a self-assessment moment of, are they right? Am I messing up? Do I need to think of it in a different way and have that like, you know, that barrier removal for a moment, like let those barriers come down and ask yourself, like, are they right? Am I willing to receive it instead of having the defensiveness of like, you don't know what you're talking about, which I think is a lot of times what happens.
But you know what? Even when you feel like that initially,
Mm,
right? So let's say you and I have a discussion, and you tell me something that I don't agree with, and I'm thinking, I have all this experience and
mm,
I have all this time in, and I know what I'm talking about, and you don't.
mhm,
The fact that you said something later on, when you lay in bed at night with your own thoughts, that creeps back in, right? You're now processing that in a different way because you're not being defensive. You're not in a fight, right? You're not in this heated discussion. Now it's just you and your own thoughts. And so if there's substance to what someone is telling you, you're gonna benefit from that, right? Maybe not at the very moment, but that's okay.
mm,
Later, ideally, as you're processing that, you're still gonna benefit, and especially if you recognize that they're coming from a good place. It's very different if someone who is that you don't perceive as a fan, right, is telling you you didn't handle that well, as opposed to someone who loves you and is saying, "Man, I don't know if you handled that well," because those are two different things. I know they're the same words, right, but it's two
100%.
different messages, right?
Yep, I completely agree. Yeah. I always try to um I never want people to feel like I'm not open to learning and open to growth. I think that, and this is me speaking personally, I think one of my biggest strengths is that I'm teachable. I want people to feel like they can come and say those things to me, but there has to be that sorting hat, like,
Right.
are they saying this because they genuinely care about me, or are they saying this because, they want to see me fail, or they're just saying it to be nasty, or, and so you have to be able to kind
Or
of,
even to be nice.
mm,
I don't need you right now to be nice. I need you to be honest,
ooh, I like
you
that a
know?
lot. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay, so I know, you've retired, and you talked about having some, moments of kind of self-reflection, over your career, and kind of looking back a little bit. And I'm curious to know, and this is a two-part question, what do you think were some of your greatest successes throughout your career? And maybe what were some of the biggest learning lessons throughout your career?
Yeah, so I think some of my biggest successes were bringing people together. I felt it got harder the more you moved up just because your level of responsibility was greater.
Mm,
But certainly wherever I worked, right, people feeling like they can come in and be themselves, people feeling like they can, say what they think, um, that they're not walking on eggshells. It's important to be able to go to work and not dread being there. Forget the work itself, just even being there. So
yeah,
I feel like I always created an environment where people felt happy at work, even if it were tough times. I feel like I did that well. Um, some of the biggest learning experiences, and by the way, while you're even reflecting at work, while you're living it, the reflection is not quite the same. And maybe by design in your own mind, you rationalize, you kind of have to stay sane. Um, but when you separate, there's no real need to rationalize anything.
mm,
You can be brutally, brutally honest with yourself, and that's okay because you're not there anymore,
yeah,
right? Sometimes you got to stay in a certain place in your mind because you're going back tomorrow and you're kind of getting back into the fight, right? So separating, I feel like I've learned so much, right, since I've left.
yeah.
um, and just from reflecting. But I can tell you, I had an experience where I put a lot of pressure on my investigators to solve a case. It got a lot of media attention, and there were people that were shot, and a couple of people died, and there was a lot of attention, and I put a lot of pressure, and they went out and they made an arrest. And we had a big press conference, and of course I was patting myself on the back and look at us go, and look how quickly we did this. And then I had one of the assistant chiefs come and tell me, "Hey, the mom of one of the guys we arrested came in and said that it was not her son.
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, that's normal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I believed her. And I was like, really? Why? I can't tell you, but I believed her. Okay, so what did the guy say? Oh no, he lawyered up right away. Okay, so what's the plan now? Well, the plan is I want to send investigators out to see everywhere she said they were. I want to send people out there to see if there's cameras, video, right? I want to see if what she's saying is true. Now, normally, Paige, that's the work of a private investigator for the public defender,
Mhm.
right? That's not our work anymore. Our work is done. So anyway, they went and they found video where it showed the mom and this person. So he was not involved in the shooting. We arrested the wrong person. So I go back to the station. The media immediately finds out. When I walk into the station, the media is already there.
Mm.
So I didn't have time to prepare of what I was going to say. They just kind of walked, oh, here's the chief now, because they were live, right? Just bad luck.
Yeah.
Well, when they came over, I think really, if I'm honest, because I didn't have time to prepare, I said, yes, we've made a mistake. I'm grateful for the work of the investigators that went out and found the truth. And so I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to call the state attorney. That's what we call him here in Florida, the district attorney. And we're going to get this person released immediately. And again, I'm grateful for the good work of the investigators to find the truth, but we're going to make this right. And I turned around and walked off, and I felt so defeated. I thought, this is so embarrassing, and what is everybody going to think? And to my shock, I started getting all these phone calls of, hey, man, that was great. How cool that you were able to say that you guys made a mistake and that you were going to fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was stunning. I didn't get a single call of, hey, what the hell were you guys doing that you arrested an innocent person? Not a one. They were all, you just told the city of Miami that they can trust you.
Mm.
That's what you've done. It was like, it's like almost like if we did a good thing. And you know what it told me, and this was very early on as me being the chief. I think it was part of the anxiety of, oh my God, look what happened.
Yeah.
I learned right away, man, if you just say the truth and how you feel and that you're going to do better and that you're doing your best, things, people accept that. We're kind of hard on ourselves, but people accept when you say sorry. I'm sorry. They accept that if they see that you're sincere.
Yeah.
And that was big because it gave me so much strength in being able just to speak freely all the time, right? Hey, this is what I think. This is what I feel. This is why. What do you guys think? And, I'm not married to anything. So, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, we'll go the other way, right? It's just all of a sudden, I didn't feel like I needed to be perfect.
Yeah. Wow. I love that story. I was actually kind of getting emotional while you were saying it because I think that we can all relate to that. We talk about how we're all human. And you said this a couple times. You're like, at the end of the day, like, I'm human, I'm a guy. And I think that we all can appreciate the fact that we are never going to be perfect and we are going to make mistakes. And for you to have not only authenticity of saying, yeah, you're right. I messed up. I'm going to make it right. But there's a level of vulnerability that's required to do that too. And I think that so often we're so afraid to be vulnerable. We're so afraid to admit our flaws and our mistakes. But that story that you just said was the opposite of, like, you found courage and strength through that experience of being vulnerable and showing people who you are, and that you are going to mess up sometimes and you're going to learn from it and you're going to grow from that. And so I do think that that story is a story of courage and strength and vulnerability.
Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty shocking. I'm not gonna lie. It's not what I expected, which is kind of a shame, right? That we feel as people that, we got about 1,000, you know. But I'm grateful that that happened early on in my tenure because it had a profound effect of, wow, look at this. And people root for you, by the way. When you say, man, I didn't do well, that's okay. Take another swing. Right? If you're saying, hey man, just you watch, then you don't get the same response, right? And so yeah, it was certainly an interesting time. It was very surprising to me, the reaction from everyone. And but it was a great lesson. It was a great lesson in a time that I thought, you know, right when that happened, I was mortified. Right? I thought, oh, this is a nightmare. And the other thing that has always bothered me too is that I always thought of myself first instead of, holy shit, there's a person in jail,
Mm.
right? I was thinking about me. Right? Oh my God, how is this going to look? How bad? That's
Yeah.
always bothered me. But, it's okay as long as you're mindful of it all, right? The most important thing was, hey, we made a mistake. I'm so grateful to that assistant chief, right? It would have been so easy for him to say, to be cynical, right? Yeah, of course. Sure, it wasn't your kid. I've only heard that 14,000 times. But,
Mm.
I'm glad he listened to his gut and his instinct, right? So, that was great for him that he came and told me what he thought.
Well, and I would imagine that it also took some courage from him to kind of challenge you and the decision that you had made, for him to come up and be like, I think we got it wrong,
Right.
because of to your point, he could have easily been like, yeah, like they made the decision, all good. Like I'm not going to ruffle feathers. I'm just going to sit back and, let the chips lay how they are. And for him to, like you said, one, be open and receptive to listening to the mom, but then also having the courage to approach you and say, I think we got it wrong.
Yeah, I'm really, really grateful. And it's funny because I was speaking to him earlier today. We still communicate all the time, all the time.
Yeah, I love that. What is your opinion, or your perspective on failure? Do you think that failure is necessary for growth?
I do personally. Um, you learn even when you win, even when things come out right. You should be debriefing, right, and going over the success, right? You should be doing that because there's going to be things that you missed that you could have done better, that you won, but you won maybe because you got lucky, right? And so there's certainly learning that can come from winning, 100%. But when things don't go well, when you fail, there's so much opportunity to learn about yourself, to learn about the people around you. You know, um, think about the people that are there to encourage you. How they're revealed. You might have not seen it before, but now you see that these people are there to encourage you, and other people that are almost pleased to see you fail. So
Mm,
people are kind of revealing themselves around you while you're growing in your capacity at whatever it is that you're doing. So there's opportunity there. You might have not ever seen that, and you should know who those people are that are legitimately rooting for you,
yeah.
because you're going to need those folks. The being able to debrief what went wrong makes you so much better in the future. You become more and more and more fail safe,
Mhm.
right? The more times you swung and missed, the more you're learning about whoever's pitching, right? So, it's always an opportunity. And so it's important. I mean, I think you're a better person. I know it sounds crazy, but I think you're a better person when you have faced different failures because you grow more confident in that. Like, hey, I survived that, and I'm even better for it.
Yeah.
And now life goes on, and again, and then again, and there's so much good that comes from that. I know it sounds a little crazy, but it's just the truth. There's so much positive that comes from when something doesn't go right. If you take it that way, if you're just gonna, you know, um, have self pity, you're gonna limit, what you can gain from it.
Yeah. No, I think I'm 100% on board with you. And I think it gives you so much confidence. Like when you when you fail or you trip and fall, or you fumble the ball, like however we want to state it, it doesn't go perfect, and you have the opportunity to get back up and debrief that to self-assess, then like I'm not going to make the same exact mistake again. I might make a similar mistake that's a little bit different,
Right.
but I'm not going to make that same. And the more you, like you said, the more you know that you can, the more that you know that you can, So I say this a lot in like doing hard things too. The more hard things you do, the more resistant to hard things you become, the more confident you are that you can do hard things. And so I think the less intimidating, the less scary and fearful you are of those things. So I have fallen on my face more times than I ever want to admit, and in front of large groups of people. I've also done it behind closed doors, and um, now when I walk outside and I do these things again, because I continue to do these things over and over again, there isn't as much fear of failure because I've already done it. I already know what that feels like. And I already know the preparation that I've now done to try to overcome that and to grow and to improve. But I understand that I have the capacity to fail again. And that's okay. Like I will
And
survive
that's
it.
okay. A
Yeah.
hundred percent. A
Yeah.
100%.
No, I 100% agree with you. And, um, now I know you conduct leadership training.
Yes.
Right? So you go around and you teach this. You teach leadership, you teach people how to be effective. And so I'm hoping that you can maybe give us a little overview. Like what are some of the things that you teach and maybe some little nuggets that you can share that maybe people don't know.
Well, the first thing that that I like to say is that iron sharpens iron, right? People are familiar with this saying of iron sharpening iron. And I know it's really basic, but if if you're willing to listen to contrasting points of view, right? Because that sharpening comes from the friction, right? And especially if it's done professionally, respectfully. But man, that contrasting point of view is so important because it opens your mind up. Even if you still stick to what you think, it still opens your mind to other possibilities and other ways of seeing something. Perspective brings calmness,
Mm,
right? So when you have different perspectives, that makes you more confident in your decision making. That calmness, people see it, it translates, people feel it, and it makes them confident in being able to follow you. So, it's not weakness to ask questions. It's not weakness to listen to people. It's the opposite. You know,
mm,
when I would promote someone, Paige, I would tell them, "Hey, I'm promoting you to this position. Congratulations. I'm going to send you here. I don't expect you to know anything about that job. It's counterintuitive. You're going to feel like, but I have this now. I got to show that I was deserving and I earned it and I know. You're going to feel that way. Don't. No,
mm,
go there, ask questions, observe, start to learn, and then start to apply some of your ideas and some of your own leadership thoughts."
yeah.
And I found that that was effective, right? So that's one of the things that I speak about. I speak about expectations. Um, People pick up what you put down. And
Hmm.
if you're looking at someone in a dismissive way, if you're looking at them like they're not capable, they don't perform the same. And in law enforcement, maybe in every field, but in law enforcement, we tag people all the time. This one's like this, and this is that, and this is a go-getter, and this one's a slug, and this one's future staff, and it's not good, right? Because they fall into that of however you tag them and label them, they fall into that.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, please, please be careful because people pick up what you put down. And if people sense that you believe in them, they want to succeed to show you that you were right. They want to. And if you're putting down the wrong message, the wrong feeling, they pick that up too. And even if they were capable, they don't perform at the same level, you know.
Wow, I
And
love
then the
that.
last thing that I try to emphasize is I like to ask people, how would you like to be described by your peers and your coworkers, your colleagues? If someone went to them right now, wherever it is that you work, and asked them, tell me about Sue or Bill, or how would you like them to speak about you? Like I like how it gets them to think. And then I tell them, and who's responsible for that? Who dictates how people see you? You do, right?
Yeah.
You're the one, right? If you want to be perceived a certain way, well, then, work towards that goal.
Yeah. I love that. So the first point, um, I actually related to this really deeply. So I had someone say that people will rise to the level of expectation. But I also think people fall to the level of expectation too. And so, to your point, and this is on a personal level, but this is how I related to what you were saying. When I grew up, I had a hard childhood. I was, the product of true drug addict parents. My dad was gang affiliated, and so the bar for me, because I was always viewed by my family and everyone around me as my father's daughter, right? My mother's daughter. I was always just going to end up like them. That was the perception of everyone around me, and that was the bar that was set. It was like, oh, yep, she's a lost cause. She's just going to end up like them anyway, so we're going to put her in this category. And I really believe that if people tell you things enough times, you start to believe it. And this can be good or bad. And so for me, because I grew up in an environment where everyone said that I was going to amount to nothing, I believed that I would amount to nothing. I was like, oh, well, my best bet is that I don't end up in prison. Like, my best bet is that I don't, end up, pregnant as a teenager, like my parents. And that's my best hope for myself. And I started to believe that. And I had these, very low expectations for myself that were set for me in advance. And I had to work really, really hard to say, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to raise that bar for myself. But that is extremely difficult for someone to do. And I think the opposite is also true. I've had people in my life that are like, wow, you could be here. And I'm like, no way. Like, there is absolutely no way that I could do that. And they're like, yes, you can. You can achieve greatness. You can achieve this. I believe in you. And it made me believe in my abilities too. And it made me want to strive to hit that bar that they raised for me. And so I think we really do have to be careful the type of messaging and the conversations that we have for people, and how can we encourage them to be the best versions or even better than they ever thought that they could be, because the more people hear these things, the more they start to believe it themselves in both ways.
Listen, it's only natural for you to think, wow, they must see something in me
Yeah.
that makes them think that I can. And so, maybe they're right. Listen,
Mhm.
when someone's rooting for you, even as a kid, right? And forgive the sports analogies for people who's never played sports, but think about it. You're at a track meet, and now you see that people came to watch you and they're rooting for you. You want to win more for them than for yourself,
Right.
just because they're there to root for you. They believe in you and you want to show them, right? So it is only natural then when people are supportive and they believe in you, you want to rise to that.
Yeah.
And if someone thinks, listen, I'm not even going to go to that. I don't even know how you made the team, right? When you're running, you're not trying to find that extra gear because it's like inconsequential. What difference does it make whether I tried my best or not? You know, I'm lucky to even be on the team. Forget trying to win.
Yeah.
It's just natural of how the brain works. That's all.
Yeah.
So it's important that people understand that because words are really powerful.
Yeah.
You have especially if you're in a leadership position, you can transform someone's life with your words,
Hmm.
right? For a positive or negative. And you should be mindful of that. Words are powerful.
100%. You had also said something earlier that I wanted to touch on, and it was this idea, and someone told me this, that, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but there's that saying that, like, who your friends are in your hardest times, right? Like, when things are really down, you know who your friends are. And I had someone challenge this thought process, and they said, You really want to know who your friends are. You want to know who are the people who want you to win. It's when you're at the top of your game. It's when you're rising to the level of success because there are a lot of people who want to pull you down, and there are not going to be as many people who want to see you succeed, right? That are cheering you on. And so notice as you start to, gain success, who are the people that are still in that corner cheering you on? Those are the people to keep, and who are the people who are trying to pull you back down to those low levels because that's where they want you. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. And I do believe that I've experienced that in my life too, where, you do start, you have the people that set the bar low and they're like, I'm here. But then the people who set it high, as you start to try to reach that level, who are the people who are trying to tug you back down? So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think they're both true, right? I think certainly the ones that are trying to hold you back, they reveal themselves, like I had mentioned before, and it's good to know who those people are.
Yeah.
And then you have people that are rooting for you. I think you still got to be careful. I don't want to sound cynical, but you still got to be careful, right? Because there are going to be some people that are rooting for you because they think it'll benefit them,
Right.
right? Well, if this person gets this job, then I have an opportunity to move up to whatever,
Yeah.
right? And it's also about them. They are rooting for you, but they're rooting for you more for them
Yeah.
than they are for you. And there's all kinds of people. At the end of the day, you know, you can start to see about the people that care about you in their hearts,
Yeah.
right? If you had a failure and they're hurting, well then you know that they care about you because they're hurting with you, right? And you can see that. It's another positive that kind of comes out of when you have a failure. Man,
Yeah.
you see the people that come around you and say, "Hey, man, it's going to be okay." Those people are hurting with you too. That means they genuinely care about you.
Yeah. Well, good news for you in law enforcement. You guys have a pretty good sniffer for those things. It's your job to kind of identify that. So, the second thing that you said that I did want to touch on, before we close for the day, but is kind of this idea of reverse engineering. I really like that you said, how do you want people to talk about you? How do you want people to describe you? And I think we can apply this in other areas too. Like when you get to the end of your career, what does that look like? How do you want to feel? How do you want to be? And then this reverse engineering from there. So, to your point, how do you want people to talk about you? Do you want them to talk about how kind you are, how funny you are, your work ethic? What is it? Like, what are those qualities? How can we work backwards and put in place things today that are going to emulate how we want to show up in the world? Same thing with wellness. How can we be as proactive as possible? So when we get to the end and you do retire, what do you want to do with your life in the next chapter? How do you want to feel physically, mentally, emotionally? What does that look like? And then how can we start putting in those steps and those reps today to get you there? And obviously, I've mentioned a few times you've entered into that new chapter of your life, and so my second to last question for you for today is, what advice do you have for someone to set themselves up for success for the next chapter? How does someone proactively prepare for retirement?
I think it's really important that they consider that, right, while they're working. So if you think, and in policing, you have a good idea, right? In policing, hey, I'm eligible to retire at this point. I can stay up till this point. At this point, I have no choice, but I have to leave, right? You already know that. Well, if you're getting close to that, I think it's really important that you start to think about what is it that I want to do? Um, and then be really honest. If you're young, if you're, I don't know, 53 years old, you have a lot of life to live. You
Mhm.
have a lot of life to live. And you've lived a lot if you're in law enforcement. You've seen a lot. So start to consider, you know, how am I going to fill the public servant side of my heart? Because you're still going to feel like you want to do something. You're going to want to contribute in some capacity. So you should think about, how am I going to fill that? Am I going to have a void like, man, before I felt like I was helping someone, I was doing something important. How do I feel that now? And you'll start seeing, start contemplating, would I like to be a substitute teacher? And if that's what it is, because I get to pick and choose when I go in, well, start preparing yourself for that, whether it's going back to school part-time or whatever the case might be, understanding what the, requirements are. Is it, I like coaching? Okay. Well, start working on the relationships that you would need to get there. And then certainly give yourself time when you separate too,
Yeah.
right? You kind of want to decompress a little bit, reflect, like I mentioned, and then be excited about, hey, let me see how this is going to be, this idea that I have about fill in the blank,
Yeah.
whatever it is. I want to start a business. I want to teach. I want to coach. Whatever it is, it's a second career. So give it a shot, right? And if it doesn't quite work out, then move on to something else. But, find purpose. Purpose is important.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also an important reminder. And like you said, it's a second chapter, it's a new opportunity. You can grow in that second chapter in your life. And I feel like sometimes it feels like there's so much finality. Like it's like, oh, I retire and that's it and that's final. And yeah, maybe you are closing the door a little bit on one chapter of your life, but there's a whole nother one waiting for you. And there's so much opportunity for you to learn and to grow and to thrive. And so, my hope is that through these conversations and individuals like yourself who are experiencing that, it can be less of a daunting thing and more of an exciting thing.
Absolutely.
Final question. What are your words of wisdom for the younger generation? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Gosh, that's a really tough one. I I definitely think there's two things as a young person. Number one, you're a little dismissive of the people that are older because you're thinking, what do they know? They're older, right? It's kind of like the opposite is true. So I would say, man, don't be dismissive of anybody, no matter where they come from, what they look like, what their background is, what their level of experience is. You never know what you're going to learn from someone.
Mm.
And, they may be new in the police department, for example, but they had another career, right? So everybody has value. And the younger that you learn that, the better off you're going to be because you're going to be able to grow so much more. The sooner you realize everyone has value, everyone brings something to the table, it's really more on you to figure out what it is. You're going to be better off.
Yeah.
The second thing that I would tell young people is don't feel um, like you're being attacked by the people that think, oh, this generation. Don't worry about that. Pay no attention to that. A lot of times I hear people say, oh, this generation, it's the Y generation. Why this? Why that? Is it really that big of a deal to explain the why? I mean, honestly, I know sometimes there's no time for that. If there's an emergency, go stand over there, do it now. I get it. But otherwise, to the older people, is it really that big of a deal to say, hey, we're going to do this because we're thinking that and we feel it'll be better, that blah, 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 blah. Is that really a big deal? Say the why. So, it's not a big deal. But for the younger person, don't be offended by it. Just keep asking. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. I really
Of
enjoyed this
course.
conversation. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your
Absolutely.
insights today. I really appreciate you.
Anytime at all. Anytime at all. Good luck to you, Paige. I hope that things continue to go well for you and you continue to grow and you continue to learn and make all these contacts everywhere because who knows where you'll be in 5, 10, 15 years, who knows, right? So, good luck to you and keep asking questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that.